press conference Saturday to talk more about deflated footballs. He told reporters after conducting several tests in recent days, he's convinced his team did nothing wrong in preparing game balls for the AFC title game. 11 of 12 were underinflated. Now, he got very scientific while acknowledging he's not a scientist, saying how the pressure in a ball can change with weather conditions.
I'm embarrassed to talk about the amount of time that I've put into this relative to the other important challenge in front of us. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in footballs. I'm not an expert in football measurements. I'm just telling you what I know. And at no time was there any intent whatsoever to try to compromise the integrity of the game or to gain an advantage. Quite the opposite. We feel like we followed the rules of the game to the letter in our preparations.
Now, the NFL has said they have no conclusions about the scandal, and the league has not offered a timetable for resolving the cheating accusations. The Pats play the Seattle Seahawks next week in the Super Bowl. Many say the team should be disqualified, though. Others say Coach Belichick and quarterback Tom Brady should be suspended. What do you think should be the league's next step? That's our topic this half hour. We want to hear from you on Facebook and Twitter. Use the hashtag Fox26forlife. Joining us live in the newsroom again is our Roundup panel led by our Fox 26 senior legal analyst, Chris Tritico. Good morning again, Chris.
Good morning.
All right, so Belichick tried to blind the doubters there with science. Do you think it worked?
No, he hasn't done anything to stop the controversy that's swirling around this, but I really think that everyone's missing the real question here is if those footballs had have been inflated to the proper level, would that have made the Colts score any more touchdowns? And the answer is probably no. And so I'm not really sure that at the end of the day this has the greatest challenge to the United States, but that's what we're talking about. Let me just start our panel. Our new member of the panel, Mike Iskovitz, meteorologist. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Mike.
Well, I know about air.
That's right. Mustafa Tamiz, our political analyst, Jackie Valley public policy analyst. We'll start with our new member. Mike, you know, Bill Belichick says these were inflated in a controlled environment, taken outside into the elements, and it was cold outside, and we all know that when things go outside and into the cold, they can shrink, right?
Right. Exactly. Let me preface all my statements by saying that Bill Belichick threw all meteorologists under the bus a couple of months ago when he said that if he were wrong as many times as we're wrong, he'd lose his job because there was a mess up of a forecast.
Right.
This
is not personal.
Okay, so that's true. Okay, so the ball is supposed to be inflated to 12.5 pounds per square inch.
Minimum.
And if that's done, let's say in a room temperature environment, that then according to the ideal gas law, okay, that if this were a fixed volume, okay, and you lower the temperature, you would also lower the pressure because the air has less kinetic energy, okay? So there's less pressure sort of bouncing off the walls of the object. My problem with his hypothesis, which is not an explanation, it's just his hypothesis, is that the volume of the ball could also change. Okay, so in a warm environment, the leather may be more stretched out. In a cold environment, the leather may compress.
But you still have the same pounds per square inch.
Well, we don't know that. And so what needs to be done is you come up with a hypothesis, which is what Belichick said. Then you need scientists to perform experiments, which is how science is done. So Boston, being an academic mecca, we need people from MIT, from Harvard, to conduct research. It wouldn't be that hard. You take a bunch of balls, you fill them up in a room temperature environment, you put them in a cold environment and see what happens. But the other thing is, how many games are played in Green Bay, in Chicago, in New England, and why hasn't this been reported for decades?
Right, let's do a $5 million study at MIT to determine if the balls deflated after they went outside. Does this matter? I mean, really, at the end of the day, does any of this matter?
No. It doesn't matter, but you know what it reminded me of? The whole Lance Armstrong scandal, right? Where it was, yes, he was doping, but the whole team was for decades, multiple times. Nobody ever knew up until at the end. And then you look at the entire system and you go, I can't trust anything anymore.
Well, he brings up a good point. I mean, the reason why we're looking at this is because this is the same team that was stealing signals, I mean, a couple of years back. And if the NFL, after their investigation, find out that Belichick and Brady had some involvement in this, there should be an asterisk by their name, just like there is by Barry Bonds and everyone else who, you know, like Mustafa said, who did things to help their image or to help win whatever competition they're in.
All right, we got to go to social media. I want to ask you another question when we come back. Let's go to Sally. She's monitoring our social media.
Okay, let's take a look at a few of the tweets that are out there on the Twitterverse. I love this one. This guy says the MVP is already decided. It's the ref that lied about testing the balls last week. Hashtag Deflate Gate. All right, this guy says Bill Belichick has me convinced the Patriots didn't cheat. Clever, Bill, clever. And then this guy says, science nerds, explain again how atmospheric pressure only affects one team's football? That's the other big question.
Well, that's and not only one team's balls, only 11 of the 12 of one team's balls,
and only this one game ever.
That's exactly right. And this is not flying, it's not flowing. I think in examining this, the NFL one more time is delaying making a decision so they can get past the Super Bowl.
Sure.
There's over $1 billion on the line here in a week, and they don't want to make this decision.
No, they definitely don't, especially when there's no conclusive proof. If they had an equipment manager that came out and said, oh, okay, we don't measure it carefully enough, then that might be an explanation. I did want to say before we wrap up, though, that I've heard a couple of already some possible explanations coming from physicists. One was from the State University of New York, and he had something that really interests me since I study clouds and, the changing phases of water, that if there was enough humidity in the air that was injected into the ball, then when it was brought outside, that water vapor could condense on the inside of the ball, putting a layer of some liquid water in there that would subtract from the pressure that was provided by the water vapor, which would lead to the ball having less pressure. That's the most interesting hypothesis I've heard so far.
It's very interesting. It's over everyone's head in this room, and it's easier for us to say they cheated.
But I doubt, and you probably are a lot more of an expert at this, I doubt if the NFL is going to make any kind of dramatic move between now and next Sunday.
Why would they? You know what I know, and I do know this because of my personal relationships. NFL hires a football security person for every team that is in charge of the footballs at every game. And that person takes them to the ref to be inflated, and then they stay in his possession. How in the world, unless that person was involved, can this happen?
Well, I make a prediction that past the Super Bowl, if they win the Super Bowl, at this point, if they win the Super Bowl, someone will write a book about how this all happened and how the cheating occurred and make all sorts of money doing that.
Jackie, you're always looking for ways to make money. Can you write this book?
I think I can. Footballs are not the only thing that shrink in the cold weather. So, this is something that's typical, and I think the NFL is just going to blow it off, and they're definitely not going to come up to any kind of decision before the Super Bowl game.
Well, and with the amount of money that's on the line, the NFL has no reason to force this thing through until they get past this game, because if their number one quarterback is involved in this, it would throw this whole thing into it.
Yeah, the only thing that concerned me with Tom Brady being such a hero, a golden boy and everything else, is when he was asked directly by a journalist,
"Are you a cheater?
Are you a cheater?" And he said, "I don't believe so."
That's the worst answer to a question I have ever seen in my life. And when I saw that, Mustafa, I thought he did it. He did it. Wow. That answer to that question said to me he did it.
I wish they spend more time on dealing with domestic violence issues than Deflate Gate.
Right.
But it looks like this is going to be the conversation going into the Super Bowl.
We spent an entire week talking about the Deflate Gate when the Middle East is blowing up again. The Speaker of the House invited Netanyahu over here without talking to the president. You've got all kinds of problems in the world, and we're talking about deflated footballs.
Well, because first of all, it's Tom Brady. All women love Tom Brady. Guys like watching him. And, there is something of suspect because, again, the Patriots they do some things that you sort of wonder. And the fact that he said, I don't know, and he had those horrible press conferences, I really think if they're found, we need to make sure that he's punished the same way Barry Bonds is and the same way Pete Rose was.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. Somebody needs to tell Tom Brady next time he does a press conference to take that stupid hat off. We'll be back in the next hour.
And don't pick on weathermen.
And he was smiling. He was smiling through the whole answer, too. It was all very weird to me.
Very weird.
I agree, yes. But good news is Coach Belichick says he's no longer talking about the subject. It's done. So there you go.
There we go.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in our next hour with two really good topics.